In earlier 19th century Edinburgh, two worlds coexisted, the refined new town of enlightenment and the shadowy, poverty-stricken old town. Amid the squalor of the old town, William Burke and William Hare emerged, not as notorious criminals at first, but as desperate men drawn into darkness by the city's insatiable demand for cadavers. Their crimes would expose the grim realities of urban poverty, the ethical failings of scientific progress, and the law's inability to protect the vulnerable. This is the story of how two ordinary men, driven by greed and opportunity, forever changed the relationship between medicine and society. In the shadowy corners of 19th century Edinburgh, where poverty and desperation intertwined, an unlikely partnership was forged. Burke and Hare's grim alliance was not born of friendship or shared ideals, but rather out of sheer chance in the city's notorious Westport. This district, a melting pot of destitution and ambition, served as the backdrop for their descent into infamy. Both William Burke and William Hare found themselves struggling to survive as Irish immigrants in a city that offered little solace to the downtrodden. They were just two among many, seeking a better life but finding only hardship and marginalization. The promise of opportunity often rang hollow in the crowded tenements and dimly lit streets of Edinburgh. Burke, a labourer by trade, toiled tirelessly, his hands calloused and his back weary from the endless hours of physical work. He sought any means to escape the cycle of poverty that seemed to grip him relentlessly. Hare, on the other hand, ran a modest lodging house, a haven for the transient and the penniless. His establishment, though humble, provided a roof over the heads of those who had nowhere else to turn. Amidst the squalor and uncertainty, Burke and Hare found common ground in their shared hardship and burning ambition. Their lives became further intertwined through their respective partners, Helen MacDougall, Burke's companion, and Margaret Laird, Hare's wife, both of whom would become complicit in the horrors to come. Their lives converged in the cramped, transient world of Tanner's Close, a labyrinthine network of alleyways and overcrowded tenements where life was cheap and death was commonplace. It was here, in this breeding ground of desperation, that the seeds of their macabre enterprise would be sown. One fateful day, a tenant in Hare's lodging house passed away, leaving behind an unpaid debt. Faced with this unexpected loss, the pair saw not grief but an opportunity, a chance to recoup their losses and perhaps even turn a profit. Instead of arranging a proper burial, they made a chilling decision to sell the body to the city's anatomists, who were always in desperate need of cadavers for their medical studies. The demand for bodies far outweighed the supply, creating a lucrative, albeit morally reprehensible, market. To their surprise, the ease with which they disposed of the body and the substantial profit they earned revealed a chilling new path, a dark and twisted avenue to financial gain that would forever alter the course of their lives. No longer content to passively wait for natural deaths to provide them with opportunities, their greed began to consume them. The allure of easy money proved too strong to resist, and their minds turned towards more sinister possibilities. They coldly realized that they could actively supply the anatomists with bodies on demand, by any means necessary, regardless of the moral implications or the devastating consequences. The line between desperation and depravity had been irrevocably crossed. Thus began a gruesome partnership fueled by insatiable greed and a chilling disregard for human life. Their pact, sealed in the shadows of Edinburgh's underbelly, would forever bind them together in infamy. In a descent into darkness, Burke and Hare transformed from two struggling men into infamous murderers, their names forever etched in the annals of crime as purveyors of death and despair. Their actions would shock and horrify the world, leaving an indelible stain on the history of Edinburgh. Their first sale, the body of a recently deceased pensioner, brought them a sum that dwarfed what they could earn in months of back-breaking, honest labour. It was a grim realization, a dark seed planted in their minds. Death could be a lucrative business. The allure of easy money, the promise of escaping their impoverished existence, proved too tempting to resist. This initial success, however morally reprehensible, set them on a dangerous path from which there would be no return. Emboldened by their initial success, Burke and Hare escalated their activities, moving beyond mere opportunism. The taste of blood, or rather the taste of money earned through death, had whetted their appetite for more. They began to see potential victims everywhere, their minds calculating the profit each life could bring. Their next victim, a sick lodger unable to pay his rent, became the target of their newfound enterprise. They plied him with copious amounts of whiskey, exploiting his weakened state. As the alcohol took its toll, they saw their opportunity. With a chilling efficiency, they smothered him, silencing his struggles and extinguishing his life. This marked a significant and horrifying shift in their criminal behavior, transforming them from mere opportunists into cold-blooded killers, driven by greed and a disturbing lack of empathy. Their method was simple, brutal and effective. Target the vulnerable members of society, those living on the fringes, the poor, the sick and the lonely. These were individuals whose disappearances would likely go unnoticed, or at least uninvestigated, making them the perfect prey for Burke and Hare's sinister scheme. Lure them into the perceived safety of their lodging house, a place that would soon become synonymous with death and despair. They offered warmth, shelter, and a temporary respite from the harsh realities of their lives, masking their true intentions behind a facade of hospitality. Intoxicate them with cheap whiskey, dulling their senses and lowering their inhibitions, making them easier to control, and then, with ruthless efficiency, suffocate them, silencing them forever and transforming them into commodities to be sold for profit. The bodies, still warm, were then discreetly delivered to Dr. Knox's anatomy school, where they were received with a disturbing lack of scrutiny. Dr. Knox, driven by his own ambition and the insatiable demand for cadavers, paid handsomely for each specimen and conveniently asked no questions about their origins. For nearly a year, this gruesome enterprise continued, with Burke and Hare preying on the unnoticed and unmissed, exploiting the desperation and vulnerability of Edinburgh's underclass. The months passed in a blur of alcohol, suffocation, and clandestine deliveries, each successful transaction further emboldening their criminal behavior. Their lodging house, once a place of temporary refuge, was now irrevocably transformed into a death trap, a silent witness to their heinous crimes. The walls themselves seemed to absorb the screams and struggles of their victims, forever tainted by the stench of death and despair. The city's insatiable hunger for cadavers, fueled by the burgeoning medical schools and the relentless pursuit of anatomical knowledge, created a perverse market that made their crimes not only possible, but also incredibly profitable. The demand for bodies outweighed the ethical considerations, creating a fertile ground for exploitation and murder. Each successful transaction, each payment received, reinforced their twisted belief that they had discovered the perfect crime, a foolproof method of generating wealth without consequence. The ease with which they were able to dispose of the bodies and collect their payment fueled their confidence and blinded them to the inherent risks of their actions. But their growing confidence, fueled by greed and a sense of invincibility, would soon morph into carelessness, leading them to take unnecessary risks and ultimately paving the way for their inevitable downfall. The seeds of their destruction were sown in their very success, as their arrogance blinded them to the warning signs that were beginning to emerge. Burke and Hare's murders were nearly undetectable thanks to their method, Burking. Burke would pin victims down while Hare suffocated them, leaving no marks, ideal for anatomical study. The lack of visible violence meant doctors, including Dr. Knox, accepted the bodies without suspicion. Victims vanished, their deaths attributed to drink or illness. This silent, intimate violence allowed the killers to operate unchecked, until a single mistake exposed their secret. The method's effectiveness made it infamous and ultimately their undoing. The horror of the Westport murders gave rise to a new verb, to burke, to suffocate, quietly suppress, or silence. The word captured the chilling nature of their crimes and entered the language as a symbol of covert suppression. Burking became shorthand for erasing inconvenient truths, a linguistic legacy of fear and secrecy. Even today, the term echoes the dark ingenuity of Burke and Hare's crimes. Burke and Hare's downfall came from their own carelessness. Their final victim, Margaret Docherty, was discovered by suspicious lodgers Anne and James Gray, who found her body hidden under a bed. The Grays alerted the police, who traced the body to Dr. Knox's anatomy school. The evidence was undeniable. Docherty's body, delivered for dissection, linked the murders to Burke and Hare. All 4 conspirators were arrested, and the grisly enterprise collapsed overnight. The discovery ended a year-long reign of terror and set the stage for a sensational trial. The city's darkest secret was finally exposed. With little direct evidence, authorities struck a deal. Hare would testify against Burke in exchange for immunity. Hare's confession detailed 16 murders, implicating Burke as the main executioner. The public was outraged. Justice seemed tainted by this pact with the devil. At trial, Hare's testimony sealed Burke's fate, while Helen MacDougall was acquitted but forced to flee. Burke was sentenced to hang, with the added irony that his body would be dissected after death. The trial gripped the nation, but the outcome left many uneasy. Justice was served, but not for all. On January 28, 1829, a crowd of 25,000 watched Burke's execution in Edinburgh. The spectacle was both justice and public catharsis. Burke met his end in front of a jeering mob. His body was dissected publicly, drawing even larger crowds. Anatomy and retribution intertwined. Burke's skeleton remains on display, a grim reminder of his crimes. Meanwhile, Hare, protected by his testimony, vanished into obscurity, his fate unknown. The public's anger lingered as the more ruthless partner escaped punishment. The story closed with one man's death and another's disappearance. Edinburgh was left to reckon with the legacy of both. The Burke and Hare case. A chilling tale of ambition, desperation, and murder that gripped 19th century Britain. The story of these two men, William Burke and William Hare, is not just a gruesome crime story, it's a stark reflection of the societal pressures and ethical dilemmas that plagued the era. It forced Britain to confront the ethics of medical science. The desperate need for cadavers for anatomical study created a fertile ground for illicit activities. The demand far outweighed the supply, leading to a lucrative, albeit morally reprehensible, black market. This case brought to light the dark underbelly of scientific advancement, questioning the very principles upon which medical knowledge was being built. The public outcry was deafening, demanding immediate action and reform. The Anatomy Act of 1832, passed in direct response, was a landmark piece of legislation. It was a direct consequence of the public outrage and the urgent need to regulate the acquisition of bodies for medical research. It legalized the use of unclaimed bodies for dissection, finally ending the black market for cadavers that had fueled Burke and Hare's murderous enterprise. This act aimed to provide a legal and ethical framework for anatomical study, ensuring that the pursuit of medical knowledge did not come at the expense of human dignity. The act stipulated that bodies of those who died in workhouses or hospitals and were not claimed by relatives could be used for dissection. The case left a permanent mark on Edinburgh's culture, a dark stain on its history that continues to fascinate and horrify. Sites, once ordinary streets and buildings, are now imbued with the chilling echoes of Burke and Hare's crimes. Relics, tangible reminders of the past, serve as grim testaments to the horrors that unfolded. And stories endure as dark tourist attractions, drawing visitors eager to delve into the macabre history of Edinburgh. The tale of Burke and Hare has become an integral part of the city's identity, a chilling reminder of its past. Burking entered the language, a chilling verb forever associated with the act of suffocating someone to death for the purpose of selling their body. And Burke's skeleton remains a symbol of the era's moral complexities, a stark reminder of the ethical boundaries that were crossed in the name of science. It stands as a silent sentinel, guarding the lessons learned from a dark chapter in medical history. The murders expose the dangers of unchecked scientific ambition and societal neglect, highlighting the vulnerability of the poor and marginalized in a society grappling with rapid change. The case served as a wake-up call, forcing society to confront its own moral failings. Burke and Hare's crimes catalyzed reform, bringing anatomy out of the shadows and into a regulated ethical framework. Their legacy is a cautionary tale. Progress must never come at the cost of humanity. The pursuit of knowledge, no matter how noble, must always be tempered with compassion, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to ethical principles. The story of Burke and Hare serves as a timeless reminder of this crucial lesson.